The major scale is the foundation on which so much of Western music is based. It's truly part of its DNA. There are all kinds of different scales out there, but many of them can be thought about in terms of how they relate to the major scale. A scale is, simply put, a specific sequence of half steps and whole steps. A half step is a distance of 1 fret on the guitar, and a whole step is 2 frets. The formula for the major scale, starting from the root note, is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So again, just playing each note once, from the root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So we've got 2 whole steps in a row before the half step, and then 3 whole steps in a row before a half step, and that leads us back to a root note. So try playing a C major open chord, and then playing the scale up the B string, using that sequence of whole steps and half steps. And then when you get to the top, if you have room, you can play another C major chord there, and then coming back down. So just let the notes ring out and settle in your ears. You really want to become familiar with the way the major scale sounds. So to practice, just play that C major chord, then up the scale on the B string. I'm picking with rest strokes here. Then C again, if you have room, coming back down. Just go slow, listening to each note, letting it ring out. So don't worry about a metronome just yet. Go as slow as you can bear to. Really focusing on the sounds you're creating and the way that each note sounds in the wider context of the scale. Can you hear the next note in your inner ear before you play it? Does it sound like it's a half step or a whole step away? The goal with this exercise is to start training our ears and learn to locate ourselves within a scale on a single string. Notice that each note in the scale is either a whole step or a half step away from another note. So if you hit a wrong note, you know that it must be sitting in between 2 scale notes. So we're going to play around with that C major scale on the B string again, where we're a bit more comfortable. And we're going to play up and down the scale, just really listening closely, trying to feel whether the next note is half a step or a whole step away. And then once we start to get a bit more comfortable, we're going to start just playing around with it a little bit. So starting on that root note, first fret of the B string, just making our way up and down the scale, listening to what we think the next note is going to be and how far away it sounds. Whole step, half step. And then when we start to feel a bit more comfortable on this string, we can just play around a bit. Cool. So when you're a bit more comfortable on that B string, pick a random fret on a random string. Let's say like, okay, well that's definitely a wrong note, isn't it? So we know that it must be sitting in between 2 scale notes. So we can play around with these. And then ascending to, I think the next note is a whole step or a half step away. I think a whole step. Yes, but now this one I can feel that tension pulling me half a step higher. And so we've found one of the pairs that are separated by just a half step. So there are 2 of these in each scale, the half step pairs, and the higher note of the pair is either a root note or a perfect 4th. So let's find that other pair, using our ear to go down. And so I think that's, yeah, I can feel that tension pulling me half a step down. But that doesn't really, that higher note of the pair doesn't really sound like a root note. It sounds a bit discordant. So the other one, that's a root. So we found a root on that string. So now we can play around with the scale. Okay, let's pick another random fret, random string. That sounds right. The next note ascending sounds like maybe, yeah, a half step. But that half step, yeah, it doesn't sound like a root note, so that must be the fourth. So let's find the root note by going down. So there we are at a root. So you don't really need to know the notes on the fretboard just yet. You can navigate up and down strings using just your ears if you're familiar with the way that the major scale sounds. So just keep playing around with these single string scales, really trying to get a feel for predicting the next note and judging whether it sounds a half step or a whole step away.